welcome back to the 919 College Football Podcast. We got Beau Worley, Daniel Adams here. It's been a few weeks since we've talked. We've got a pretty filled-in show for you. Got a lot of things to cover. Just a quick rundown. We're going to go through what has happened up to this point. So we left off in Week 2. So we'll catch up on Week 3, 4, and 5. And that's at the national level. Give you a couple predictions for Week 6, maybe a couple upsets. Of course, run down the teams in the 919 area, right? So Duke, North Carolina State, see how they're doing. 2 of those 3 will be on a bye this week, so maybe you're taking a well-rested break. And then we're going to go over some of the hot-button issues. That's a new part of the show here on Episode 3. Some of the hot-button issues facing college football right now, such as the transfer rule, Jimbo grabbing the face mask of one of his players in the Arkansas game last Saturday, and then a few different things regarding some predictions and one-loss teams that could make the college football playoff. Now that I've got that out of the way, Beau, what's going on? What have we missed these past few weeks? What are the fans waiting for?
What's up, Daniel? It's been a long time since we've been able to get together to do this podcast. Since it was week 3, we were not able to talk about those games. There was some good games in that week, and there's been a lot of good games each week, I think. And I've heard a lot of people say that, this college football season has been boring, which I think is absolutely absurd. There's
no such thing as boring college football.
Not at all. I've absolutely loved the college football season thus far, and that's why we like talking about it with you guys every couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. So we'll go ahead and get started into it. Going back to Week 3, and I will add, Beau and I don't get to watch too much college football together, but we did get to watch some games Week 3 because I was a refugee from the port city of Wilmington. Hurricane Florence came in and made its mark, actually made landfall at Wrightsville Beach. So I evacuated up to Raleigh, was able to catch a few games with Beau. Beau had a pretty good setup at his place. He is a true college football fan, I can say that. He had about 3 or 4 TVs going.
Oh, yeah.
He's
nothing
really
but the best at the
used to that AT&T hookup.
Yeah, nothing but the best at the Worley household at in Raleigh. And Raleigh was fortunate. We got lucky and with the hurricane, and wish the best for those that were more heavily affected by the storm, and people still feeling the effects of that storm even several weeks after.
I'll tell you what, Beau, we hadn't even talked about this before we got on air, but I think it would be very generous of us to donate all our advertising proceeds from this episode to the relief efforts of Hurricane Florence in Wilmington. So a few of our sponsors, we'll just go ahead and take those checks that we normally cash on
this episode brought to you by Toyota.
So, anyways, let's go ahead and get back on track and get going. Week 3, quick rundown, a few big games that we wanted to touch on. TCU, Ohio State, but what were your thoughts on that game?
TCU, Ohio State, I mean, TCU going in that game, we thought that they could match up pretty well with Ohio State. I believe you had TCU in that game. I had Ohio State. And what happened? What happened was pretty much what I expected. TCU, they look fast, they look athletic, but so does Ohio State. And those fast and athletic players are better than TCU's, and that reflected in the scoreline, 40-28. Not much of a. I didn't think it was much of a sweat there for OSU.
Ultimately, TCU, had the lead going into the second half, and they kind of just shot themselves in the foot a little bit. And when you're an underdog, I think they were a 11, 12-point dog. Mm-hmm. When you're in a position like that, you can't turn the ball over. You can't have punts blocked. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot, but they're pretty much done for as far as the college football playoff is concerned. That's the Horned Frogs.
And especially after losing to Texas this past week.
That really hurt them.
And another huge game for week 3, which is the game that me and you watched together and had a great time doing it, was the LSU Auburn game. In Auburn, 22-21 Tigers / Bayou Bengals, not Tigers / War Eagles.
That's right. After we got off the air on our on episode 2, we were talking about predictions for that game, and Beau realized that for the Auburn LSU game, he predicted the Tigers to win. So
pretty good prediction.
No matter what.
It was a nice prediction on my part. But I meant the Bayou Bengals in that
Bayou
one.
Bengals.
Yeah, they face Florida this week. They're still undefeated even after week 3. They have a huge game in the Swamp, and they're up to number 5 in the AP poll now, and a lot of they started off the season barely in the top 25, and because they've always underachieved. And now their rankings 5th, maybe still that's a little high, but they're definitely better this year than they have been in past years, and they have a very, very tough stretch coming up, including a matchup with the greatest show on turf, which is the Bama Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. And interestingly enough, on ESPN right now, the matchup predictor, according to ESPN's Football Power Index, has Florida beating LSU this week. 58% chance of Florida winning. However, Vegas has LSU by 2. So we'll get into some picks for that later. Another big game from week 3, though, was BYU over Wisconsin. Now, that really shaped up the college football playoff. A lot of people had Wisconsin as sort of a surprise Big Ten team. The Big Ten West is a little bit soft, so they thought Wisconsin would kind of run through that. And if they could upset Ohio State or Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, they would have a chance at making the college football playoff. I still think there's an extraordinarily slim chance, I'd say less than 1%, that Wisconsin could do it. I don't see it happening, but it's not completely out of the question at this point.
We'll discuss them. We'll discuss them in one of our later segments. But it was a very bad loss for Wisconsin at home, and I think they have just enough kind of meat on their schedule left to where it could be an obsolete loss. But that's not good for the Big Ten, and there's been a lot of criticism about the Big Ten recently. Maybe they're a little bit overhyped from the preseason.
Yeah.
But no, that definitely you don't want to lose that game to BYU. BYU's not bad. BYU is a good team. However, they shouldn't lose that game.
No, especially not at home.
Yeah, exactly. And moving on to the next week, I think the biggest game in week 4 was Oregon Stanford, which was a crazy game.
Was what do they call it? The Pac-12 after dark. Normally for these 10 o'clock starts, it's the I don't know, bottom barrel Pac-12 teams. You'll catch like Oregon State playing Cal or something, and will this be in 919 East Coast boys? We're not going to stay up and watch that game. But this was an 8 o'clock start, so we were able to really, hone in on this game. There wasn't another primetime game that was nearly as good as this matchup. I thought this is game of the year candidate for sure, at least at this point.
Did Oregon, this might be an obvious question, but I want to hear what you think. Did Oregon lose this game, or did Stanford win this game?
I would say a combination.
That's good. That's a good answer.
That's a good political answer there. But yeah, you think about it. Oregon had the ball on Stanford's goal line. The replay review brought that touchdown back to the 1 or whatever it was. And then they fumble the snap, get backed up. Second down, errant pass or whatever. So now it's 2nd and goal from the 8-5, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then another bad snap. So 2 bad snaps in one possession inside your own 10-yard line. This one was fumbled and taken back to the house by Stanford. I mean, that reminded me of Washington and Auburn week 1. Washington kept getting inside the red zone but couldn't do anything or turned it over. So in that fashion, I mean, if Oregon could have punched that ball in, that would have ended the game as far as I'm concerned. But they gave Stanford a little bit of breathing room or a little bit of sliver of hope, and Stanford really just took off with it from there. So,
well, yeah, but even after that, Oregon's still winning the game, right. and Oregon has the ball in the fourth quarter. I mean, great chance to waste some time and maybe even wrap the game up. They're up 31-28 in the fourth quarter, and they fumble with 2:19 left, up 3. And that was at the Stanford 40. So that's, and then ball security, big mistakes, really cost Oregon maybe a chance to make some noise in the college football playoff conversation.
At least in the Pac-12 North. And, I mean, you look at that, Stanford follows that up with a loss at Notre Dame, so they've dropped in the rankings a little bit. I mean, had Oregon won that game, that would have really vaulted them up the rankings. And
especially with a game versus Washington this week.
Right.
At home at Oregon, so I mean you're looking at an undefeated team against a top 10 team. That could have been a top 10 matchup right there, and so they really blew an opportunity there. I think it was more Oregon losing than Stanford winning, and Stanford really even the next week, this past Saturday, going into South Bend. And really not being competitive at all in that game until after during the second half. Bryce Love goes out injured, and I think they're done. But we'll talk about Stanford because they are one of them one-loss teams.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Pac-12 shakes out and ultimately what the college football playoff looks like as far as conference representation. But like you said, we'll get into that in one of our segments a little bit later on.
And I want to point out before we move on to our local teams here in the Triangle, the biggest game from this past weekend, Ohio State and Penn State in Happy Valley. The place looked like it was rocking. It's really cool to see. I think a lot of colleges talk about like a blackout or a blue out or whatever, some alternate color, but I think Penn State really does it right, and their fans do it right. And that stadium, and they're decked out in all white, looks pretty intimidating, pretty cool.
Yeah, that does look really cool. And it's funny because you can always tell where the visitor section is in a home stadium, right? So, like at Georgia, for instance, we're familiar with that, like right there on the goal line on the visitor corner.
Mm-hmm.
Normally that's where they put the visitor section. But I kept looking for red. I didn't see hardly any red. There were specks of red, but there was no one section that was just all red unless it was way up in the rafters.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, to the game itself, obviously Ohio State wins a classic. They come back again. You remember Penn State in the game last year at the Horseshoe. Ohio State came back in the fourth quarter. Again, this year Ohio State comes back in the fourth quarter. And, I have to put that on the shoulders of James Franklin, being outcoached by Urban Meyer 2 years in a row.
What do you think about that fourth down call?
One of the worst calls in the history of college football.
I mean, you got Trace McSorley, who's had an incredible game. I don't understand how you take the ball out of his hands. Maybe I think he probably overthought it and thought that Ohio State was just going to be so keyed on the pass that he could sneak in like a 5-yard run or something like that. But
yeah,
you just can't take the ball out of his hands in that situation.
Well, this is not the Seattle Seahawks versus the New England Patriots at the 1-yard line when you have Marshawn Lynch, and you have timeouts left. This is you're 4th and 5. You're around the 50-yard line, I believe it was. and you first Ohio State calls a timeout. They saw how Penn State came up and lined up.
Yeah.
And then it seemed like a 20-minute timeout. And then they come back out on the field. Penn State comes and looks at Ohio State's formation, and then they call a timeout, which felt like it added another 20 minutes to into this game. And then both teams come back out. I'm expecting another timeout because that's how it was going, and everyone is expecting the pass. Other than, the Ohio State did great. They blew up the play. But, it really didn't even look like an RPO, a run-pass option.
Yeah.
It really it didn't even look like McSorley read the defense. He just kind of just gave it off. And 4th and 5 from the shotgun, game on the line, you hand the ball off and you get stuffed.
Yeah, that just looked weird. The whole thing just looked weird. And it's funny, all those, when games come down to the wire and there's a 4th down situation, whether it's 4th and goal with 2 seconds left and the team's down 4 and just needs a touchdown, or whether it's an instance like on Saturday, it always seems like whenever there's timeouts called, it benefits the defense. I feel like the more that the defense can kind of stagnate the game, it disrupts the flow of the offense. But when you see those fast-paced, long pass and everyone's running up to the line, and they get set, and there's 8 seconds left, and they snap the ball, that's when you see those crazy endings where they get the touchdown.
I agree.
Obviously, Ohio State had the timeouts and was able to use them. So, again, Urban Meyer doing a good job coaching. But I think that's kind of always been just the way it seems. And I don't have any stats to back that up. That's just me watching a lot of football and picking up on trends. So.
Yeah, and that wraps up our national overview. Like I said at the beginning of the show, a lot of people have been disappointed, been saying this college football season is boring. I would say that there hasn't been much parity as far as big upsets, maybe just with the Wisconsin game, and the ODU Virginia Tech game, which is crazy upset. But the games have been really good. The games that we expected to be good have always have delivered, and I'm sure we're going to have more to come. But on to local our NC teams in the 919 area code: NC State's, UNC, and the Blue Devils.
So you want to start with NC State since they're the ranked team, probably.
Sure, we can start with NC State. They did not play during the week 3 due to the hurricane, and then they had a huge game against West Virginia, which that would have been, I think everyone would want to see that, kind of get a better gauge of where really both teams are. West Virginia, that would have been a big resume win at NC State. And then kind of send a message to the Big 12 and also the College Football Playoff Committee. And then NC State just to be recognized as a good team, which they are. If they had come out with the win over West Virginia, but that's really a moot point now. So they didn't play. The next week, NC State was at Marshall. Took care of business there, and then their first ACC game this past week versus Virginia, which again they took care of business. Their offense and their defense looks very balanced right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. State seems like one of those teams historically that plays to the level of their opponents. So when they play a team like, not that Marshall's not good, but when they play a team like Marshall, they kind of play to the level or just well enough to beat them. Same with South Alabama. And the first half of their first 3 games when they were playing group of 5 teams, and James Madison, it seemed like they didn't really separate themselves to the second half. So that West Virginia game was going to be a good measuring stick for Dave Doran and the Wolfpack. The Virginia game, Virginia's actually surprisingly doing well this year. Bronco Mendenhall's got them rolling a little bit, but I think that it's going to be tough this week for State playing Boston College. For some reason, they can't get over that hump. But, yeah, you're right. State defensively balanced. beginning to run the ball a little bit now. Ryan Finley is probably the best quarterback of the three teams that we discuss on the local level. He's really slinging the ball. Those wide receivers have kind of stepped up. So State's looking like a dangerous team right now. One thing we found out, too, right before we started was that they have decided to schedule a 12th game, a makeup game, to replace that missed West Virginia game, and they will host East Carolina on December 1st, assuming they are not in the ACC championship game. So that will be Saturday, December 1st, the same day as a bunch of the conference championship games. So if they somehow make the conference championship, win the Atlantic, then they will obviously cancel that game. Otherwise, they will be playing ECU, and that's also assuming ECU does not go to their conference championship.
You know, I think even if NC State does win the Atlantic Division, they should still play ECU instead of whoever wins the Coastal, because I think ECU would be a tougher game in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee.
Seriously. Yeah, the Coastal's been – I mean, Virginia Tech losing to Old Dominion, Virginia Tech probably should have had to forfeit the rest of their season for that. And then nonetheless, it was a quarterback for Old Dominion. It was a walk-on backup. I mean, one of you or I could have probably played quarterback at Old Dominion as a walk-on.
Oh, definitely. I could at least make kicker. No, that's definitely. I think that's one of the biggest upsets in college football history. It ranks up there with App State in the Big House over Michigan. I would still rank App State probably ahead of it because it was at Michigan and ODU was playing Virginia Tech at their home stadium at Old Dominion.
Yeah, but Old Dominion convinced Virginia Tech to come to their place. I don't know, but Virginia Tech hopefully learned their lesson not to go to these small schools who, this is kind of the game of the year for Old Dominion.
Yeah, and so we're the NC State and Virginia Tech, they don't play each other this year. I don't believe.
They do not.
They don't. And so, NC State looking ahead, since we are talking about possibly an Atlantic Division challenger, they have Clemson, they have Boston College this weekend, which is a huge game. In Raleigh
might actually be a tough game.
And Syracuse is looking very good in the Atlantic. They they almost pulled off the upset at Clemson. Clemson on their third quarterback in the depth chart. It was funny. Hunter Renfrow has to be in the quarterback's room now. I don't know if you saw that. He's having to take snaps under center.
How long has Hunter Renfrow been at Clemson? I swear that guy's been there since Taj Boyd was the quarterback.
He may have been. I think him and the who was the dude, the basketball player at Kansas. That was really. He seemed like he was there forever. He looked like like one of those guys you see at the YMCA. He was kind of balding a little bit. Oh, what was his name? I forget.
Was it Kansas or was it Perry Ellis?
Yeah, Perry Ellis. I think Renfro's freshman year was Perry Ellis's sophomore year in 2008.
Perry Ellis was 45 before he graduated.
He was 45. But that might be one of the FBI investigations that's going on over in Lawrence.
Those Adidas schools still in trouble.
Yeah. So over to Durham now. The Blue Devils lose a big game to the team that we were just talking about, the team that lost to ODU, the Hokies.
Yeah.
And even especially after that game, you thought maybe Duke had a chance to win this game, but I think maybe it did the opposite. I think it probably got Virginia Tech angry and more focused for the Duke game, just to show maybe the ODU game was a fluke. And Virginia Tech won that game fairly easy, and they're back in the top 25. But in Duke, the Blue Devils drop out after losing their first game of the season.
Yeah, this sort of feels like a repeat of last year for Duke. So last year Duke started 4-0 and then lost 6 straight games. And Game 5 was a big Thursday night matchup between Duke and Miami. So Miami came to Durham. They had not quite yet gone on their run of rising to the top 10, but they were looking like a good team. That's Miami that I'm talking about. Miami was looking like a good team. They come into Durham. This was going to be, a couple teams that were either in the top 25 or right on the cusp, and Miami just kind of took it to Duke and blew them out a little bit, and then Duke sort of went in a tailspin. And that seems like the exact same thing that has happened this year. So Duke starts off 4-0 again with a couple good wins. They've kind of overcome some injuries, both on the defensive and offensive side of the ball, with a key cornerback getting injured for the year. And then their starting quarterback, Daniel Jones, going down for a couple weeks with a broken clavicle. He made it back really quick, which was surprising. But needless to say, a couple big road wins at Northwestern, at Baylor, and then obviously took care of business at home against North Carolina Central. Duke was ranked 23rd, kind of building momentum, looking like they were going to be setting up for a big Saturday night game with Virginia Tech, and it just came out flat. Virginia Tech just looked better than them in all facets of the game. So back to the drawing board a little bit. I think that the Devils will not lose 6 straight this year. I think they'll be okay. Definitely make a bowl game. I definitely see 2 more wins on their schedule. I think it'll be a 7-5 or 8-4 year for Duke, which, Cutcliffe will continue to make a living at Duke if he can just keep them in that range.
I'm calling this now. Let's write it down. October 2nd, 2018. Duke will go into Death Valley, Clemson, South Carolina, and beat Clemson.
You've got Duke over Clemson.
On November 4th. Clemson always loses that game. Always loses those games. The past 2 years, they've been upset late in the season.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's going to happen a third year in a row, and it's going to be the Blue Devils this time.
I would sure like to see that.
No, the ACC wouldn't like to see that. I can guarantee you that.
No, John Swofford would not like to see that. But we were texting this past weekend during the Clemson-Syracuse game, and I said even if they lose, they can still get in, and you said no. So you don't think, had Clemson lost that game, you don't think they would have gotten in?
No, I don't think they would have gotten in this year with one loss. I think there'll be teams that this year especially, I think it's there's a lot of good teams at the top now. Bama for one, Georgia, Ohio State is up there, LSU now. Obviously some of those teams are going to have one loss because they're going to play each other, but
right.
Those would have been better losses than Syracuse.
Yeah.
So I didn't
especially
think.
At home.
Yeah, especially at home. I don't think they would have been able to recover from that loss. But obviously, they made it the playoff the past 2 years after losing to Pitt 2 years ago, and then Syracuse last year. So,
right.
Maybe they could have, but I wouldn't have put them in.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. It's always. If Clemson wins out, LSU might lose some games. Of course, there's a ton more time to go before the college football playoff is decided, but it just felt like if they would have lost that game, they lost it early enough in the season, they would have had some time to make up for it, in my opinion, even though their schedule is pretty light on big games, to no fault of their own, really. It's all conference games left besides South Carolina, so they can't control the conference games. So we'll see how that shakes out. They're only obviously the team now that's scheduled, that's on their schedule that's ranked is NC State, and NC State, may not be ranked by the time Clemson rolls around, depending on how they fare in the next couple weeks. So. We'll see. And actually, that game's in 2 weeks, isn't it?
Clemson and State, they play in sometime in October, I believe.
So they play So State plays Boston College this week, then has a bye week, and then we'll play at Clemson October 20th. So big game there for the Atlantic standings. But back to Duke really quickly. What do you see the finishing up record, Bo? You see an 8-4?
I think I agree with you. 8-4. I don't think they beat Miami
No.
at Miami. They'll beat the Tar Heels by about between 35 and 70 points that week, and it's at Wallace Wade. You know, I'm already planning to go to that game. We've talked about this before. I hate Duke with a passion as a Tar Heel fan, but I love going to Wallace Wade. Do you know why is that, Dan? Why do I love going to Wallace Wade?
They had, and I'm drawing a blank on the. Oh, it's a barbecue parfait, I think is what it's called.
Yes, it is the barbecue parfait. And if you don't know what the barbecue parfait is, go to I think it's Hog Heaven in Durham.
Yep, Hog Heaven.
If you can't go to Hog Heaven, go to a Duke game, football game sometime. Don't worry, it's really easy to get tickets to those games.
Tickets will not be hard to find.
Yeah. And the price of the ticket is worth getting in and paying for the barbecue parfait. And what that is it's almost exactly like it sounds. It's a parfait cup with barbecue, North Carolina vinegar-based barbecue on the bottom, topped with baked beans. The next layer is coleslaw. And then to top it all off with some little garnish, they put some nice, awesome hush puppies just sticking out of the top of the parfait cup. And it is to die for. And,
That's Eastern North Carolina's version of a healthy snack.
And, it's really good. I really recommend it if you ever make your way down to Wallace Wade for a game. And you can put barbecue sauce on it and mix it all up, and I can't pass that up. So every time North Carolina goes to Duke, I go and I get myself a couple of those barbecue parfaits.
I'm looking at this schedule, looking at games I might be able to go to. So they've only got 3 home games left. At UVA at home, I won't be able to go to that one. That's on the 20th. That's my mom's birthday. Family takes priority, of course, but maybe the UNC game or the Wake game, we'll have to see. Maybe we can get up and go to that UNC game at Wallace Wade, though.
Yeah, we need to. That'll be a good time. Maybe we'll do a video pod. Maybe we'll do a video pod that day,
like a live stream podcast.
Exactly.
That would be great.
And but to answer your question, before I got to thinking and daydreaming about the barbecue parfait. Right now, Duke is 4-1. After their bye, they're at Georgia Tech. I think that's a win. I think at home versus UVA is a win. I think at Pitt is a win. Miami is a loss. So that puts them at 7-2. And then I think they beat UNC. That's 8-2. And then I already called Clemson.
Yeah,
so that's 9-2. I have them at and I think they'll lose to Wake just because I can't say that they're going 9 and they're going 10-2. They're going 9-3. They're going 9-3.
That would be pretty incredible.
You know what? They lose. I bet they're going to lose to Georgia Tech. They'll be 8-4.
They'll beat Georgia Tech. They'll lose to Pitt on the road.
Pitt is garbage. They lost to and this is a great segue into the Tar Heels. They lost to UNC, who is one, and they proved it again this past week. They were one of the worst teams in the nation. They gave up 3 defensive touchdowns, and they weren't even close. They threw the 2 interceptions right to the defensive lineman.
I don't know how Chad Surratt was able to get back into the game after some of the decisions he made. I mean, Nathan Elliott may not have been able to win them many football games. I mean, he beat Pitt, but everything I've seen from Surratt leads me to believe he is not a starting quarterback.
And, he doesn't care either. I watched the game on Thursday night, and they'll cut over to the sideline, the camera will, and he'll just be sitting there with his arms crossed like this while his team's getting plastered. And that's just not what you want to see from your quarterback. I mean, he didn't start, and he's already suspended for 4 games for breaking team rules.
For 3 games. Let's make sure it's 30% of the schedule.
30% of the schedule.
I don't remember them saying that in the headlines though. When this was first announced, it was a 4-game suspension. 1 game gets canceled because of Hurricane Florence, and all of a sudden it was not in fact a 4-game suspension. It was just a suspension for 30% of the schedule.
Well, because the news is always right. They're always reporting correctly. So let's I don't think that's much of a big deal that you're trying to make it out as, sir.
Well, I don't think it made much of a difference against Miami, but had Carolina pulled off some huge upset there, maybe the naysayers, such as myself, may have come out and raised some concerns. I would have had to get on the coaches' conference call and question Fedora's decisions, but I digress. Back to you, Beau.
And so they're Pitt losing to North Carolina after North Carolina had their UCF game canceled by the Hurricane, and they probably would have lost that game as well had they played it. And
that one could have gotten ugly. I'm sure Carolina wasn't too disappointed to cancel that game.
Right. And but the next week they beat Pitt. Pitt comes in favored as it was Carolina's home opener in the 4th week of the season. And it was it really was a good game from a neutral standpoint. If you can call
pretty high score.
If you can call North Carolina Pitt a good game. 38-35, the Tar Heels come out on top. They showed, and it's hard to talk about this because we know what happened the next week. It's hard they showed some life in that game. They showed some good rhythm on offense. I know they gave up 35 points, but they had some good defensive stops. And then the next week, on a short week, they're at Miami, and that game was, I wouldn't say it was over when it started because North Carolina was still in it at halftime. I think it was a 21-10 game and North Carolina and UNC was getting the ball back after halftime. They could have done something there, and obviously they didn't. They lose 47-10 to the Canes and Miami. So it's kind of back to being bad, really. I was listening to some other people saying the team was saying how after the hurricane week, the week off, it was kind of like a starting over and kind of hitting a reset button to the season after 2 losses to Cal and ECU, and it's just really they kind of wanted to say like, hey, it's not. Our football game is important. It Hurricane kind of put things in perspective for the team, and
right.
They got that win at Pitt. They may have just been like, this was a good win for us, and then they go up and get dominated by Miami and really don't show any sign of life or attitude or care. And again, talked about this on the last podcast. Fedora, I think he might be on his way out this off season.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They've got, looking at their schedule right now, Virginia Tech is their next game, and that's at home, but you got to assume that that's going to be a loss. And then at Syracuse is a tough game. That was a sort of probably looking at that last year or the year before, you're thinking, all right, that's a game that we can go up to the Carrier Dome and win, but Syracuse is having a really good year. And then at UVA will probably be a tough game. I think that's a winnable game, but I think it'll be a tough game. Georgia Tech at home, again, that's going to be another one. Georgia Tech's always tricky with that triple option. On the road at Duke, probably, as of right now, you got to say it's probably going to be a loss. Western Carolina, a win. And then State at home, I think State will win that one. So you're looking at like a 4-8 or 3-9 season if Fedora can turn this around and make a bowl, I think that will be his saving grace. And they might, I wonder if they're sitting at like 5-6, if UNC will try and squeeze in a game that same week, December 1st, against somebody to try and get to that 6th win to become bowl eligible. Mm-hmm. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to wait and see with the Tar Heels, but really not looking good. Looking like a bad season again for them. Basketball season's right around the corner. But yeah, we'll see. In October, practice is starting. It is October 2nd, so no fear for the Tar Heel fans there. Good days are right around the corner. So that's our wrap up of the local teams. Like we said, Duke and UNC going into bye weeks, and let's hope they don't lose those games versus bye University, and then NC State playing Boston College in a big Atlantic Division showdown. So now on to one of the big talking points of this week, and we go to Clemson, where we talk about the transfer rule and Kelly Bryant deciding to transfer. He was Trevor Lawrence was named the starter on Monday, and then Kelly Bryant announced his transfer from the university on Tuesday. Now, I know that you want to talk about the rule itself. I want to talk about the decision itself. So you go ahead and talk about what you think about the rule.
Sure. So when the rule first came out, I thought it was a good idea. I think it's pretty silly a lot of times for these freshmen to come in knowing that they're not even going to play. So, for instance, at Duke, because I pay attention to Duke a little more, it seems like half of their recruiting class won't even play. Maybe over half won't even play their freshman year. They'll just sit on the bench, take that red shirt, get used to college life, get their bodies bigger and stronger and faster to prepare for their second year in college, which would be their redshirt freshman year. So now I think this is giving them an opportunity, even if it's not in big games, to play against a team of the group of 5 level or an FCS game, to at least get some game experience. I thought that was great. I thought this is a really good idea. It's going to benefit these kids. It's going to benefit the teams. Great idea. Great decision. Now that the rule is playing out in real life, you sort of realize some of those unexpected outcomes. And that's that there's this sort of trade deadline, stealing words from Hunter Renfrow at Clemson. Mm-hmm. After 4 games, there's this deadline where it's like, all right, I was not happy with my playing time, I'm transferring. And we've kind of seen that a little bit in college basketball. After the first semester, people do that sometimes. They'll say, okay, for the first 5 to 10 games or whatever up until exam break, I didn't like the amount of playing time I was getting. I'm going to transfer. That way I'll be eligible the following year for the second half of the season. So I thought it was a good rule. I still do think it's a good rule. I think the intent of the rule is good. Obviously, people are going to take advantage, or not take advantage, but play the rule to their benefit. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But do you want to just chime in briefly on on what you think about the rule before you get into this specific case?
I just think that I think the rule is fine. I mean, it's just weird, I mean, student athletes are held on such a different standard than normal students when it comes to transferring.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just a really tough thing to get right. There's going to be people on both sides to where they think they're right. There's going to be arguments everywhere about what the rule is. If a student needs to transfer, if a normal academic student needs to transfer in the middle of a semester, then they can do that because it's what's best for them if they need to do that. But if a student athlete needs to transfer because he wants more playing time, that's a little bit tougher to do. He can't play obviously if he transfers, he can't play the rest of the season, can he?
Correct. So he can't play the rest of the season, but
Yeah.
he would be able to play in game 1 of the 2019 season.
Right. And do you know? I mean, could he still come back to Clemson and play?
He could. There seems to be this talk from people in positions such as ours, like at ESPN and stuff, that say, this would be a great opportunity for him to, maybe he just made an emotional decision. He's a senior. He lost his job to a freshman. He kind of just overreacted. He's still apparently enrolled at Clemson.
Uh-huh.
So Dabo's pretty much said he's not going to talk about it anymore, but I think when he was first asked right after Brian announced that he would transfer, if he would let him back on the team, I think he sort of insinuated that he would. Kelly Bryant was well liked among his teammates, obviously a leader, senior leader, so I think they would let him back on the team. But it looks like Trevor Lawrence is going to be healthy. Dabo said he's going to start this weekend, so I don't know, but
and I just want to talk about this specific situation itself. It kind of reminds me of a couple weeks ago when the Buffalo Bills cornerback he retires at halftime. This is obviously not that bad and kind of a different situation, but you don't like seeing players kind of, I guess, quit on their team. And, I don't want to say quit. He obviously wants to. This is a way for him to be able to be looked at more by the NFL. When you're not playing, you don't get as much opportunity, and to be seen by the NFL. And that's why he's.
Clarify, sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, Dabo never said he wasn't going to play. He just said he's not going to start.
Right. Well,
so
but
he
so
still would have gotten playing time.
So yeah, and you're right about that. But obviously, Kelly Bryant didn't think that. I mean, so if it was just a thing about not starting, but he would still play and he still get his shot and still be able to make a difference on the game. And he's going to transfer, and that seems more of like I have to start. This is my team. It's all me, type of thing. But from what I hear about the Clemson players, he's been a great guy and he works really really hard. So I think this is one of those. This is a very gray area for me. I didn't like the decision personally, especially because what would you have done? What would you have done? You're transferring, but then what are you going to do after that? You announce that you're transferring. Your team knows you're gone. They lose some respect for you. I mean, why not just? But I guess then you lose the red shirt. If he continues to play, but just
right.
I don't know. You got to stay and fight. You got to show some loyalty. You've been there for 4. You're a senior. People on that team look up to you, and then you have some adversity, and all of a sudden you're gonna transfer, and I think I think it's giving up on the team.
Yeah, it felt like divine intervention that Trevor Lawrence was struggling a little bit against Syracuse, and then he gets hurt. It's like, man, if Kelly Bryant would have just stuck around, this would have been his time to shine. He could have led a comeback. The team was struggling. He could have led the comeback. Maybe earned the starting role back. But it's just he made a quick decision. I'm not going to speculate and say that it was an emotional decision. But he made his decision. I think at this point, I would have a hard time letting him back on the team if I was Dabo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just, I understand these are young men, but still, you kind of quit on the team there. So I would have a hard time letting him back on the team.
Yeah. All right. Well, real quick, we're going to talk about the Jimbo Fisher incident this past weekend, grabbing the face mask of one of his players. I know you, and I know, and definitely me. We grew up in some tough love situations as kids, and I think, in the in our climate, our social climate these days, I think this could be seen as something bad, as abuse. I think this is more just tough love. Honestly, I think that he kind of showed it with his body language that I think he kind of showed that he made a mistake a little bit. He kind of realized in the moment after he grabbed Terrell Dodson's face mask that he probably should not have done that, and I think he kind of gave him a little pat after that, and I think it was more of a tough love situation than anything. I don't think that, but I understand why we're talking about it. It's just the time we live in.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Bo. I think a lot of these people that are calling for Jimbo Fisher to be suspended are taking it a little bit over the top. He didn't. When you go back and look at it, you can tell after he grabbed onto the face mask, he let go pretty quickly. Like after he did it, he sort of caught himself and realized, I shouldn't be doing this, or this is going to cause me to get some backlash. Whatever the case was, but he just grabbed it. He didn't jerk the kid's head around like a dog or anything like that. He wasn't ripping this guy's neck, ripping Tyrell Dodson's neck around. He just grabbed his face mask. Mm-hmm. And let's not also forget, I think sometimes this is another thing that people sometimes forget. Tyrell Dodson I don't know whether or not he just got an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, but it wasn't like he was just standing there. He had just done something wrong. There was just sort of a scuffle, and he was about to either get in a fight or do something. And I think Jimbo obviously was frustrated with the way Texas A&M was playing. He's the coach, though, so he cannot lose his emotions. He's got to keep his emotions in check. But just the fact that he grabbed his face mask for a second, I don't have any problem with it. I think sometimes people in you and I's generation, though, and maybe a little bit younger, have been coddled a little bit. So I will back up Jimbo on this one. I think he didn't do anything necessarily wrong. I wouldn't advise him to do it again, certainly. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's worthy of a suspension.
No, definitely not. And I'm happy to see. I think even Tyrell Dodson was asked about it, and even he said, he was right to do that to me, and right. He didn't make a big deal out of it, which was for me, it was good to see. Like I said, I think it was tough love. When this is not a big thing for me. This is not Bobby Knight. This is not.
Yeah, this is not Bobby Knight choking out one of his players on the sideline.
Yeah, this is no Bobby Knight. But like you said, don't do it again. Don't make a habit of this. Right. But one time, yeah, maybe you made a mistake. To some people and maybe times have changed, but don't do it again. So with that, we move into the big picture. What we think about our playoff predictions thus far. And do you have your 4 ready to go?
I do. Would you like me to start?
You start.
So there's, I think, 11 undefeated teams in college football right now. Obviously, not every single one of them is ranked, I don't think. 8, 9, 10. They are all ranked. Sorry, excuse me. They are all ranked. I thought there was maybe 1 or 2 outliers that were not ranked, but they are all 11 are ranked. Might be more than 11. Either way. My top 4, I'm going to go Alabama gets in as the overall number 1. I think they win the SEC undefeated. They roll. The Tide roll. Number 2, I've got Ohio State. I think Ohio State, I don't see Ohio State going undefeated. I think they're going to lose a game somewhere, whether that be Michigan State, or another trip up somewhere. I don't think they will go undefeated. However, I do think they will win the Big Ten, and I think they will get in. So I got Ohio State as my number 2. Clemson rolling in at number 3. I see the Tigers going undefeated, winning the ACC and getting in. Their schedule is just favorable for them to win out, and then beat who I think will be Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game, or as Beau has called, maybe Duke. Might be a rematch in the ACC championship.
It seems like I have called that. I kind of want to go back and re-examine that a little bit. I don't know, but it does. I think Duke's capable of, and I mean, just real quick, I think Duke's capable of pulling off the record that I said because it's fairly weak, other than Clemson and Miami. But yeah. So continue on with your 4.
And then number 4. So again, 1 Alabama, 2 Ohio State, 3 Clemson. Those are teams that have already been in the college football playoff. And then number 4, coming in at number 4, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. This team has played pretty well up to this point, and they've had some tough games. So they started with Michigan. That's a tough game. Won that game at home. They've beaten Stanford again at home, so the schedule was favorable for them to get a couple of their toughest games at home. But they go on the road at Virginia Tech this weekend, and then the schedule really lightens up for them. They've got Pitt, Navy, Northwestern, Florida State, Syracuse, and USC. So those are all winnable games. They should be favored in every single one of those games.
Mm-hmm.
I see them winning them all and making it to the college football playoff. I don't care what people say. An undefeated Notre Dame team is not being left out of the college football playoff. Even a one-loss team, if they lost to Michigan to start the season and then won every single other game, I think they still get in. At this point, if they lose, they might not get in, but we're all aware of the Notre Dame bias, and there's no way that an undefeated Notre Dame team, even if they don't have a conference championship to win, is being left out of the college football playoff.
Yeah, and even when the BCS era, Notre Dame had their own kind of rules of how they qualified for a BCS game, and they haven't been to a playoff yet. I think they would. I think there would be some bias to get Notre Dame in there. So you have Bama, surprisingly, and then you have Clemson, you have Notre Dame, and you have Ohio State.
That's correct.
So no Georgia.
No Georgia.
Who does Georgia lose to?
Georgia loses to LSU.
Okay.
In Death Valley.
Yeah.
That game's at LSU. Then they have Auburn at home. They beat Auburn at home. They played Bama again in the SEC championship. Nick Saban continues to beat his former assistants in the SEC championship.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2-loss Georgia. You can't put a 2-loss team in, even though their losses are what people would say is good losses.
Right.
There hasn't been any 2-loss teams in the playoff yet. I don't see this 2-loss Georgia team getting in. If the other, if everything else holds, if Ohio State continues to win, if Notre Dame continues to win, I don't see 2-loss Georgia getting in. No,
I agree with you, and that's why I don't have them in either. I think LSU beats Georgia next week, October 13th. So for my 4, I have Alabama, who will be the number 1 seed. I don't think that they'll lose to anyone. I think they beat LSU.
Yeah.
And which is in Baton Rouge. And I agree with you. I think Ohio State wins out. And I think that they run the table in the Big Ten, and that they win the Big Ten championship against Wisconsin, and they also make it into the college football playoff. And then back to LSU, I think LSU makes it into the college football playoff without playing in the SEC championship and with only 1 loss.
Wow! So you just have LSU losing to Bama, and that's it.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And I think that kind of like last year, Bama's only loss was to Auburn, and they still got in even without playing in the SEC championship game. And they ended up. We all know the story. They all won the championship. So I think LSU loses to Bama, but they still get in with one loss. And then I agree with you. I think Notre Dame will get into the final fourth spot, and I think that their biggest test will be this week in Blacksburg. Enter Sandman will be pumping through that game, and then they have USC last week of the season, which is that's more of a rivalry game. It's a big rivalry game. Probably for the older generation, not really mine. I don't really care about that game very much as far as rivalries go.
Well,
it's
USC nor Notre Dame has really been that good in the past
2
years.
Yeah, you're right.
Notre Dame had that one good season where they made it to the national championship. That was 2012 or 20. I guess that would have been the 2012 season, I think, and they got smacked by Bama in the championship game.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Manti Te'o was still grieving from his fake girlfriend.
Yeah.
But needless to say, since that.
Do you think he has a real girlfriend now that he's in the NFL?
Hope so. Gosh, he's in the NFL.
We need an update on that. Why has ESPN not done a story on that yet?
Seriously. What if I told you Manti Te'o
has a real girlfriend? Hey, Daniel, now that we've gotten into podcasts, I think we can go into production, into film production.
Should we start with shorts? Just
12
minute.
Yeah, we'll start with shorts. I think I've learned a lot from the show Entourage recently about the movie business. So I think I'm ready to be a producer.
We need an Ari Gold to we need a good agent, a good strong agent
to
represent us.
Yeah. Real quick before we get into some predictions for this year, we won't even talk about it in detail. But one team with one loss that has a chance to get into the college football playoff, as it stands now, they can't be undefeated now. They can only have one loss now.
So, looking at the team schedules and everything right now, the one-loss team that I think has the best shot at getting into the college football playoff is Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at one-loss teams that have gotten in the past, there's a kind of a common theme. They lost games early, minus Bama last year. They lost a game early to a good opponent, and then won out the rest of the way and won their conference championship. So Washington still has the chance to do that. I don't think they will do it. I just think they have the best chance to do it.
Yeah.
So looking at all the other one-loss teams, and one thing that really just blows my mind is the fact that people are still talking about Michigan getting into the college football playoff. They barely beat a now 1-3 Northwestern team. They barely put up enough points to beat that team. There's no shot for Michigan getting into the college football playoff this year. I just don't see that at all. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jim Harbaugh will get things turned around on the offensive side of the ball up there, but I don't see them making a ton of noise. I see Ohio State beating them, Penn State beating them, but I think they will beat Michigan State. So Harbaugh will maintain that losing record against the big rivals of the Wolverines. Who do you think, Beau? When you're looking at one-loss teams, who do you think?
No, it's hard to disagree. I completely agree with you. Washington, just for the reasons that you said, I'm not picking another team other than Washington.
They've still got big games, so they still play at Oregon. That's another good chance to win. Colorado at home, and then Stanford at home. So they still got big games to play to work themselves back up into that top four.
Yeah. I do want to pose one more question, though. We're kind of up against it. We're already over time for a little bit. UCF, they have any chance?
UCF has no chance, and I think that's a crying shame.
Okay.
I wrote a blog post about this, but there are probably only 50 teams that even enter the season with a chance to make it to the college football playoff. I mean, none of the group of 5 teams even have a chance. College football is one of the sports where it might be the only sport where a team goes into the season knowing that they have no chance of making the college football playoff, no matter what they do.
Yeah.
So I don't like that about college football as much as I love it. That's one thing I hate about it. But yeah, I mean, Central Florida has no shot.
Yeah. Too bad. Oh well. So predictions on this week's games. We want to start locally here in Raleigh. Boston College versus NC State. Number 23 NC State, I believe. Yes.
Number 23 NC State. I will go with NC State. I think they're going to maintain the winning ways. They're going to do just enough to get by. This is going to be a close game, though.
Mm-hmm.
Boston College, as well as they played early on in the season, has not looked too good recently. So I think State, if this game was in Chestnut Hill, I'd pick the Eagles. But being in Raleigh, I think State will take this one. What do you think?
No, I agree. NC State will win. The crowd will be electric in the first half. It will still be a game going into halftime, but the crowd will leave, as they usually do at NC State, to go to their immaculate tailgating space that they have in the middle of the fairgrounds. But I don't blame them. Who would want to be in that stadium anyways? I'm just kidding. But they're NC State's used to that, and they'll come out on top. So now, quickly, some of the higher profile games. Let's just pick a winner here. Let's go with first FSU Miami.
I'm going Miami. This game is in Coral Gables. Miami pulled off what was an upset at the time last year when they beat FSU in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
FSU turned out to have a horrible season. Miami had a pretty good season. I think N'Kosi Perry's pretty good. He looks good against the Tar Heels, but that's a tough measuring stick. As much as we've talked bad about the Tar Heels, he looked like he had it going on. This is one of those games, though, where this could save FSU's season if they win. But I still think Miami has enough to get it done. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Miami at Hard Rock Stadium comes out on top of FSU. FSU will get it turned around. I think Willie Taggart will get it turned around, but not this week against the Canes.
Right, agreed.
And let's go. We didn't be looking at this game at the beginning of the season. This game was not on any of our radars, but we have number 13 Kentucky going to College Station and Texas A&M. I have Texas A&M -6. However, we were talking about this pre-show. I was like, Kentucky, they're not going to win that game. Texas A&M with the upset. But you can't, in fact, have an upset when the team is not favored. So Texas A&M with the favored Texas A&M with the win over number 13 Kentucky at Kyle Field.
Yeah, I got to go with Vegas on this one. A&M over Kentucky. Kentucky, I don't think they've beat Texas A&M since they've joined the SEC, since Texas A&M joined the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't see them winning this game. If it was in Lexington, I'd go Wildcats, but I'm going Aggies on this one. This feels like one that Jimbo needs to win to sort of salvage. If he loses to Clemson, he loses to Alabama, that's okay, but he can't lose to Kentucky.
To show some sort of improvement from the Sumlin era, yeah, you're right.
Right.
And I'm glad that game's at 7 o'clock Eastern instead of the 3:30 game. That way we can watch the next game that we're going to talk about, LSU at Florida. I have the Bayou Bengals winning this game in a close one, but a slugfest. Defensive battle.
I think LSU rolls. We've had a lot of similar picks. The only difference in this one being that I think LSU wins handily.
Mm-hmm.
I think Florida's a little overrated. They beat Mississippi State team that I don't think is that good. I think Florida is going to be in for a whooping here. Yeah, I think LSU rolls in this one.
And next, Red River rivalry.